This is an Inbound Logistics AI presentation.
Okay, so you've been bringing us some fascinating stuff about keeping your transportation operations financially sound.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to payments.
Right.
And, with e-commerce booming,
Yeah.
the volume of goods moving around the world is just huge.
It really is. It's just exploded.
That's a lot of invoices and a lot of payments.
Yeah.
And a lot of potential for things to go wrong if you're not careful.
A huge potential for things to go sideways. Yeah. And the information you shared, it highlights it perfectly,
Right.
The more freight moving around, the more transactions there are, the higher the likelihood that discrepancies are going to creep in.
Yeah.
And it becomes a real challenge to maintain accuracy at that scale.
And you're already being proactive.
Right.
Right. You've got systems in place to check payments before they go out.
Yeah.
So the question is, why is a post-payment review still so important?
Right.
What does it catch that those upfront checks might miss? I mean, that's what we really want to get into today.
That's our mission for this deep dive. We want to look at how pre-payment reviews and post-payment reviews work together.
Yeah.
They're not rivals. They're partners in making sure that you're operating smoothly and efficiently.
Exactly. It's not about choosing one or the other. Both are essential.
Absolutely.
They're both part of a really strong financial control framework.
Yeah.
I like to think of it as a safety net with multiple layers.
Multiple layers, yeah.
So let's talk about prepayment checks for a minute. What are some of the limitations of only looking at things before the payment goes out, even in a well-designed system?
Well, you have to consider the practicalities. In transportation, it's all about speed, getting goods moving quickly.
Yeah.
Time is money, so those prepayment checks, they have to be fast. You don't want to hold up a shipment while you go over every little detail with a fine-tooth comb.
Right. You don't want the payment process to become a bottleneck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even with the best systems, even with the best training, you can still have human error. People make mistakes, they enter data wrong, they overlook small details, or maybe they just lose concentration for a second. Those little unintentional errors, they can slip through.
So they happen even when everyone's trying to do their best.
Absolutely. And then, unfortunately, you also have to consider the intentional errors, where someone's deliberately trying to misrepresent information to kind of game the system. Like they might submit an inflated invoice or manipulate some data, and you might not catch that in a quick prepayment check.
Especially if you're just looking at individual line items, right?
Yeah.
You're not seeing those bigger patterns.
Right. You need to be able to step back and look at the big picture.
And on top of all that, the rules are constantly changing.
Oh, absolutely. The new regulations come out, internal processes get updated, and if your prepayment check is based on the old rules, you might miss something.
It's like your defenses are out of date.
Exactly. And often these checks, they only look at individual transactions. They don't look at the big picture, the overall trends.
Yeah.
So recurring types of errors or systemic weaknesses. You can't spot the patterns if you're only looking at one piece of the puzzle.
So prepayment is like that first line of defense.
Yeah.
It's trying to catch the obvious stuff.
Yeah.
But it sounds like the real value comes from being able to step back and analyze things later.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the benefits of post-payment review. How do they address these limitations?
One of the biggest benefits is the time frame. A post-payment review lets you look back much further.
Okay.
Like for ocean freight, you can often review billing errors for up to 3 years after the ship date.
Wow.
And for other modes, it can be up to 5 years.
That's huge.
Yeah.
What kind of things are you typically finding that far down the line?
Well, sometimes it's those really complex issues. Like with international shipping, you've got surcharges and exchange rates and tariff classifications and all this documentation.
Right.
And you might not have all the pieces of the puzzle until months after the shipment. But a post-payment review gives you the time to reconcile everything.
Yeah.
You can uncover misapplied tariffs, hidden fees, things like that.
That makes sense.
And another key benefit is that you're verifying the accuracy of the completed transaction.
What do you mean?
Did the service actually happen as agreed? Was the right quantity shipped? Did it arrive in good condition? Was the amount billed and paid correct?
So you're making sure that what you paid for is what you got.
Exactly. And because you're looking at things more in depth and you're looking at more data, you're more likely to find errors or even fraudulent activities.
Things that you wouldn't have seen in a quick prepayment check.
Right.
So it's not just about catching mistakes, it's also about evaluating your processes.
Exactly. Post-payment reviews give you a chance to see how well your prepayment controls are working.
Are they catching the common errors?
Right. Are there gaps in your processes?
And once you've identified these discrepancies, what happens then?
Well, the biggest benefit is that you can use that information to improve your processes.
So it's not just about getting money back.
Right. It's about long-term efficiency.
You find the weak spots and you fix them.
Exactly. And it also helps with compliance. You can make sure that you're following all the rules and regulations.
Makes sense.
Plus, it promotes accountability. When you compare what was supposed to happen with what actually happened, it helps to make sure everyone is doing their job properly.
And that feedback loop, that's really valuable for continuous improvement.
Absolutely. You learn from your mistakes and you do better next time.
So prepayment is the gatekeeper and post-payment is the quality control.
I like that analogy.
Now, you mentioned something interesting about specialist providers who focus on post-payment reviews in transportation.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that.
Well, transportation is complicated. You've got contracts and tariffs and all sorts of potential charges.
Right.
And some companies find it helpful to work with specialists who really understand all that.
Like Trans Audit.
Yeah, Trans Audit is a good example. They've been doing this for over 45 years.
Wow.
And they work with a lot of big corporations.
And I read that over 95% of their clients also use a prepayment review provider.
Yeah, which shows you that these are complementary services.
You need both.
Exactly.
And what's unique about Trans Audit's approach?
Well, because they only focus on post-payment reviews in transportation, they've got a lot of expertise.
Yeah.
And they've developed their own systems specifically for this type of audit. They also have these subject matter modal experts, SMMEs.
What are those?
They're people with like an average of 20 years of experience in transportation finance and operations.
So they really know their stuff.
Yeah, and they don't just look for basic errors. They also do audits to make sure you're following all the rules of your contracts, which can be very complicated.
Right. That's not something your typical prepayment check can do.
No, it's not. Another interesting thing about Trans Audit is that they work on a contingency basis.
What does that mean?
It means you only pay them if they recover money for you.
So no recovery, no fee.
Exactly. And they handle the entire process internally so you don't have to use your own resources.
That's really helpful.
And they're known for building strong relationships with their clients.
So to sum up, using a specialist for post-payment review is not about saying your prepayment checks are bad.
No, not at all.
It's about adding another layer of protection.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be a huge burden in terms of time and cost.
Exactly. And in fact, these post-payment providers often work closely with prepayment providers.
They do.
Yeah, they're all working towards the same goal, which is to save you money and make sure things are running smoothly.
So for you, the listener, the big takeaway is this. Prepayment checks are great, but they're not enough.
You need that second layer of verification.
You need a post-payment review to catch what those initial checks missed.
And to make sure your processes are as efficient as possible.
Exactly. Especially in the world of global transportation, which is so complex.
Absolutely.
Now, here's a final thought for you. We talked about those long timelines for finding and fixing errors, sometimes years. So think about it. What potential problems might be lurking in your system right now?
Good question.
Problems that you don't even know about because you don't have a post-payment review strategy in place.
Food for thought.
So consider the benefits of a two-pronged approach
Both prepayment and postpayment.
to protect your bottom line. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
Join the conversation on this topic by clicking the link in the show notes or visiting inboundlogistics.com.